Good morning, everyone. We are so happy to have you here. My name is Kim Phillips-Knope. I am the project lead for the Michigan Department of Education's LGBTQ plus students project. I use she, her pronouns. And we're going to get started, but before we do, I just want to let folks know that we are recording the webinar today, or our training here today. We didn't mention that in the pre-email, so we're want people to know now. And if you have questions that you want to ask, but you don't want them to be recorded on the video part, you can drop them in the chat, because the chat isn't recorded. So it's just a way to do that if you don't want to. But we have had so much interest in our trainings, and we haven't been able to always let everybody in. And so we're hoping to sort of use it as an opportunity to share with more folks. So just so you know. All right. So I am going to share my screen here. All right. So this is where you're at. Hopefully, this is where you intend to be. As I mentioned, my name is Kim Phillips-Knope. Tracy and Katie and Lori, do you want to introduce yourselves as well, please?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Tracy Hobbs, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I've been one of the traders in this program since 2011. I'm a semi-retired school psychologist living in Lake Ann, currently working for Traverse Bay Area Intermediate School District. I'm also a nationally certified welcoming schools facilitator. Glad to be here today.
Thanks, Tracy. Lori?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Beckhofer, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am with the Michigan Department of Education. I am the project director on this LGBTQ students project, and you may also know my name because I'm the HIV and sex education consultant with the Michigan Department of Education as well. That's it.
You're up, Katie.
I am Katie Lemmer. I use she, hers. I am the project assistant on this LGBTQ initiatives, working primarily with MoAsh.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. All right, so we'll get moving here. So we start all of our trainings with a land acknowledgement. So we just want to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the Menominee, Fox, Anishinaabe, Peoria, Chippewa, or Ojibwe, the Sioux, Mississauga, Odawa, Miami, Potawatomi, and other Native peoples who have stewarded the unceded land that we are all standing on throughout the generations. Yeah, so welcome. We just want to sort of have a few, I don't know, logistics to cover here at the beginning. First, we just want everybody to, do whatever you need to attend to your learning needs, to be so that you can be as present as possible. As I mentioned, we are recording the training. This is a skills building sort of interactive workshop, and so we want to make sure folks are aware of that so you're ready to participate. We will be doing an activity later in the training that requires that we're going to use a Google Doc, and we have found that for folks who are using a Chromebook or on this training via your phone or a tablet, that you're not able to access the document and contribute, share on it, but you'll still be able to you'll be working in a small group, so you'll be able to type answers, but you will be able to be a part of the conversation. So if you wanted to change computers, now would be a good time to do that. We are offering Sketches and Social Work CEs for free. The code for Sketches will be provided at the end of the training. We just want to remind folks that when you apply for Sketches, you need to make sure that you complete the actual form and turn that in with your PIC code and the session code in order to get your Sketch credits. Oh, and you have to do it within 24 hours. You have to turn it around really quickly, and we'll provide all that information to you. And then we will be emailing you the PowerPoint, a strategies list, as well as a 2-page resource list following the email, or in a follow-up email after the training. this is just a little bit about the project for those of you who are not familiar with us. We have been around for about 17 or 18 years at this point. We provide trainings both in person and online, well, online right now. We also do technical assistance and drop-in support. I'll share a little bit more about the drop-in support later in the training. We worked with the State Board of Education on their statement and guidance on safe and supportive learning environments for LGBTQ+ students, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And then finally, we have our resource guide, which is in its 7th edition. It's in paper copy right now, but we're hoping to transition that to an online version here in the next little bit. Fingers crossed. All right, so that's a lot about us. We would love to learn about you. Just want to invite folks in the chat if you would be willing to share your name and your role. If you feel comfortable sharing your pronouns, we would encourage folks to add them to their Zoom name or to the chat. And just remembering that your pronouns are the words that you want other people to use when they refer to you. So to use he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. Maybe there's another set of pronouns that you use. And then on a scale of sloth, how are you feeling this morning? If you want to drop that number in the chat as well, that would be great. I think I'm going with a 9 actually this morning, or maybe a 7, feeling pretty good. All right, I'll give folks a chance to make sure you've got your sloth number so you can drop that in the chat. All right. And then we just want to make sure that we're all sort of in the same place in terms of our group agreements. We do this, again, as a part of every training that we do. So first, wherever you're at is okay. We don't come to this work with any expectation that anyone has any set of values or beliefs or any level of experience. Our job is to provide you with the information and resources that you need to be the best possible support to your students. No one knows everything, but together we sure know a lot. This is really just an invitation to bring your own experiences into this space and to make it as meaningful as possible to you. It's your stories and sort of on the ground experiences that are really important to the work and to the conversations that we have. So please bring those into this space. Make room for discomfort. There may be some things that we talk about that sort of, that are a little uncomfortable, and just want to remind folks that discomfort is a natural and normal and actually a really positive part of the learning process. And it's that sort of edge of discomfort that is the learning edge that where we do the most growth. So take responsibility for your own learning. This is an invitation to ask questions. I feel like in a Zoom setting, taking yourself off of mute and asking a question and interrupting can be, I don't know, feels more challenging, I guess, or feels disrespectful or more disrespectful in some way. We really encourage folks to take yourself off of mute and interrupt us. We like being interrupted to be able to answer your questions. And as I said, if you feel more comfortable asking those questions in the chat box, please be sure to share them there. And then the last thing, delay distractions. I think this is incredibly challenging right now, but as we are able, if we can try to have our phone muted and turned off or whatever we need to, email notifications, all that good stuff, that would be great. And then just a few things to reflect on, just remembering that our own experiences, our identities, privileges, biases, all these things shape who we are. They shape how we see the world and how we move through the world. And having some awareness about that as we're moving through our training would be helpful. Take note of resistance. Is there places where you notice yourself kind of pushing back on information that's shared? It's really just an invitation to approach it with a sense of curiosity and kind of wonder what that's about and see if there's any opportunity to kind of understand yourself better from that place. Being conscious of intent versus impact. No matter our intention, we can still cause harm. And so we want to make sure we're taking responsibility for that when it happens. And then connected to it, let's dismantle systems of oppression and not each other. For example, just remembering that, if we can try to call people in instead of calling people out, that would be great. and remembering that if we're on the receiving end of that, being called in is a gesture of trust and respect, and we want to try to receive it as the gift that it is. And then finally, there is so much going on in the world, my goodness, if we can just try to take care of each other and praise on each other and lift each other up, that would be great. I think we could all use it. Is there anything that feels like it's missing from our group agreements, or anything that folks have questions about or want to add? All right. Well, if anything comes up, please don't hesitate to let us know. Thank you. We can revisit these anytime. All right, these are our objectives. This particular workshop, we're really focusing on systems level changes, so that sort of macro stuff. We spend a lot of time in many of our other trainings focused more on those micro level interactions and opportunities. But this one is really looking at the big picture, the way our schools function and our policies and things like that, to try to understand ways that we can influence them to be more inclusive and address the needs of LGBTQ plus students. This is our agenda for the day. So we'll do welcome, all the setting the stage stuff we're doing right now. We're gonna kind of look at systems, like what are the systems that are at play in our schools, and we'll kind of explore the impact that those systems have directly on the experiences of our LGBTQ plus students. And then we're going to dig in, we're going to spend a good chunk of time looking at strategies and identifying strategies for sort of moving things forward when it comes to being more inclusive. And then we'll bring some closure and be done for the morning. And then this is, we include this slide in all of our trainings. It's just a friendly reminder that while we're all living through a time of, the pandemic and racial injustice, and we've all experienced the political upheaval, that not all of us have experienced it in the same way, and just wanting to remember that that for LGBTQ plus students, that they are experiencing it differently and may have different needs. And particularly our LGBTQ plus Black and Brown students may have additional, experiences around racism that they may also be experiencing. And all of these things can have a compounding effect. Compounding effect. So yeah, just want to, again, sort of keep that in mind, that our experience may not be the same as our students' experiences. All right. We're done setting the stage. We're going to dive in now. So we're going to start with a very sort of brief opening activity. For those of you who are not familiar with Mentimeter, there are 3 different ways that you can access this. You can use your phone and take a picture of the QR code there. You can also go to menti.com and put in that voting code. Or you can use the link that hopefully somebody just dropped in the chat box. Did somebody do that? Awesome, thank you. And you can go directly there. So I'm going to encourage folks to do that. I'll give you just a moment here, and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right. And I'm going to start presenting. So the way this goes is that you will have an opportunity to provide some ideas here. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see your responses as they come up. And so the first question is, when you think about all the different ways we can influence change in schools, what comes to mind? What are all the different sort of points of influence that we have? And you can put in as many answers as you have. Folks can start dropping those in whenever you're ready. Great. So teacher training, role modeling, right? Building relationships, policies. Oh yeah, scheduling, like group activities, areas of belonging. I really like that, the framing of that. Like, where are we creating these physical spaces or virtual spaces where students have that sense of belonging? Building community, walk the talk, Yeah, that modeling piece. A lot of emphasis on building relationships. So, so important. How we present our space, our office. So what does it look like? Yep. Directly funding. Yeah, money. Where is the money going? That is a huge indicator of what we value in our schools. Interviewing students. Yeah, asking students what is happening for them. What are their experiences? Getting information from folks. Looking at your curricula. Yep. Family. How does it feel in the space? Be more inclusive in our sex ed or other areas. Training, support, advocating. Absolutely. Policies continues to come up. Having those real conversations. Removing institutional barriers, so important, and it might be helpful also to think about what are those barriers. We're going to get to that next. So take maybe another 10 seconds or so to drop any ideas that you have. Hiring folks, this is a great one we don't often see, but just sort of thinking about who are we bringing into our space to begin with. What are the values that we want those people to embody, for them to really be in the culture that we want to create for our school. All right, better diversity. Yeah, on the school board too, right? Fantastic. All right, we're going to go to the next slide here. Acceptance, I think I saw pop up. Oh, folks have already put some answers in, which is great. What are examples of school-based systems of oppression that impact? So what are those systems of oppression? Where do you see these things playing out? So we got a lot of bathrooms and locker rooms. Assessments, yep. How are our assessments? What do those look like? Again, that's sort of really speaking to what we value. The facilities, relationships again, group activities. Yeah, looking at discipline, absolutely. What are our discipline policies, and not just our policies, but how are they implemented? What does our data show us about how we are enforcing our policies and where there might be bias? Student information system limitations. Yep. Our enrollment forms. Wow. Yeah. Limitations that are placed on teachers in terms of resources that they can share with students. Dress code. Yeah. Mental health resources. What are the like hoops that we make students jump through to join groups that give them a sense of belonging, like GSAs? Yep. Not honoring people's names. Athletics. This is great. Graduation robes. This is coming up, especially now. If you have different color robes that are gendered. School uniforms. Parental influences. Yeah, looking at religious differences and how those come into our school settings, whether it's through our families or through our educators. All right, take another minute or like 10 seconds or so. All right, fantastic. So I'm gonna stop sharing here. And so what you have already sort of named, we're gonna kind of dig into a little bit more. So you clearly have a real sense of where the direction that we're going and kind of that big picture stuff that we're gonna be talking about, and then kind of what it looks like on the ground too. I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my other screen again. All right. All right, Tracy, I'm passing it on to you.
So, school folks are real familiar with this three-tiered pyramid. And so what we're talking about today in the workshop, it would fall into tier 1 of your PBIS effort. So it's connected to things you're already doing. So remember that tier 1 activities occur in all settings, and they're focused on prevention and proactive things, and they also encompass all students. So that, again, this is kind of universal practice that would influence your school climate. So again, what we're talking about here are policy things and issues and interventions, not the interpersonal interactions that Kim talked about earlier. Both are obviously important to change. When we did the Mentimeter activity, all of these showed up. So these are examples of systems of oppression that impact our LGBTQ students. And all of these were included, things like discipline, dress code, lack of inclusion in policies and curriculum. So you clearly identified a lot of these issues.
Mhm.
So the State Board of Education in September 2016 adopted this guidance statement, and it's a recommendation. It's not a requirement, so it doesn't have the power of law, but it is clearly guidance to schools. The one caveat here is that the Biden administration just signed an executive order preventing and combating discrimination against LGBTQ people that includes language related to education, indicating, for example, that students should be able to participate in all aspects of school in accordance with their gender identity. So this kind of it falls in line with that recommendation. So there are two sections to the policy. The first one is LGBTQ plus students overall. And Lori, I think, put the bookmark in the chat where you can find the whole document. And the second section of the guidance document refers specifically to transgender and gender non-conforming students. So today we're going to focus on the first section. We're going to look at all 8 recommendations which fall within, again, what we would consider those universal interventions in PBIS and are intended to impact systems level change.
All right.
So again, as I said, the guidance document is separated into 2 sections. The first section provides research-based best practice approaches to creating a school environment that's safe, supportive, and gives all students, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, an opportunity to learn and thrive. So these are the 8 areas that we look at. The first one is in reference to anti-bullying, non-discrimination, and student code of conduct type policies. So policies that specifically name sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression are correlated with a positive school climate. So again, those policies that are enumerated and include specifically those categories are found to be significantly more effective. So the second one speaks to the need to train all staff on policies, procedures, and LGBTQ content. Most educators didn't learn LGBTQ content in their teacher preparation or K through 12 schooling. As a mental health professional in the school, I know that as a school psychologist, we didn't have this kind of content either. So we're not often informed specifically on these issues. So as such, educators may be less comfortable including content or addressing issues that arise in their classrooms or hallways. So providing this kind of PD is vitally important. The third one speaks to gender sexuality alliances, GSAs. They used to be called gay straight alliances. Now the term that's more often used is gender and sexuality alliance. And research shows that there's a correlation between a positive school climate, not just for LGBTQ students, but all students in the building, even if they don't participate in a gay straight alliance. And that, I think that research is pretty compelling, that it does have a significant and profound impact on school climate in a positive way. And GSAs are protected through the Federal Equal Access Act, a federal law that protects student-led clubs in public schools. So basically what that says, if there are any student-led clubs in a school, a GSA falls under those and must be allowed to function within a school setting. The fourth one there, the most important and impactful people in a child's life are their parents and guardians. So providing affirming resources and support to families and acting as a liaison between families and students when conflict arises is one of the most critical roles educators can play in ensuring student success. So again, providing family engagement and support. The next recommendation is connected to ensuring that schools have age-appropriate LGBTQ inclusive content and curriculum in all aspects of their educational culture. That idea that our curriculum can provide both a window and a mirror for our students. The next one is about providing developmentally appropriate information in school libraries and media centers. And there are several different sources for book lists that for media specialists to look at. The American Library Association, for example, has a database and they update it very regularly about content that's appropriate for school media centers. The next one is collecting information about the experience of LGBTQ students, and that can help us understand their success and challenges and address issues that arise. For example, GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, conducts not only a national school climate survey, but they also have a district level survey that you can utilize to collect and review data at your building level. And the next one, the last one here is school buildings and districts benefit from having an identified staff person. They can seek out who is informed and trained to help school staff, students, and families when issues arise. So identifying that sort of go-to person that becomes the district or building expert on these issues. It could be a Title IX coordinator, it could be a school counselor, another educator in the building, but kind of identifying that person to find those. The next part of the guidance document refers specifically to transgender and gender nonconforming students. The recommendations are based on research and best practice for transgender and gender nonconforming students, as well as current interpretation of Title IX in court rulings. And again, with that, the Biden executive order, that changed pretty significantly recently. As federally funded entities, public schools are legally required to be in compliance with Title IX. So at this time, case law across the country is applying Title IX to protect transgender students. This section focuses on things like how a school may come to find out they have a transgender student and how to respond. It talks about name and pronoun usage, as well as school information management systems, approaches to changing student records, disclosure of information about student, including the application of FERPA in these situations. It also talks about school activities that may be segregated by gender. So each part provides details on how a school may handle different situations and includes information about application of Title IX in common situations. There's also a section that talks about dress code for transgender and gender nonconforming students, and several of you brought that up when we did the Mentimeter activity.
All right, I'm multitasking, trying to answer people's questions.
Okay. I see things popping up in the chat. So.
Yeah, there's some great comments and questions.
Yeah. So we bombarded you with a lot of information there. This is strictly for you. You don't need to put this in the chat or unmute yourself, but what is one thing that you'd like to remember from this portion of the training? Our intention here is not to have you write this publicly, but again, write it down and kind of keep it for you in your notes from the webinar. If there's one big takeaway, what would that be?
I know I'm gonna go off script a little bit here too. I just want to check in too and see if there are any questions that folks have or anything. We've shared a lot of information, and just want to give folks an opportunity to sort of bring anything forward that they're wanting or needing when it comes to what we've covered thus far.
And Kim, I see in the chat there was a question about book list. Another good source is Welcoming Schools. If you're not familiar with the Welcoming Schools program, it's sponsored by the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, and they've added some secondary content, but it's primarily elementary focused. And there's not a lot out there actually for the elementary level, and we tend to talk about these things more at the secondary level. So if you go to the Welcoming Schools website, there's book lists and they're sorted by topic. So it can be on family diversity, it can be on gender-based bullying, those kind of things. So if you're at the elementary level or looking for resources, that's a really great place.
Yeah, and we can try to get those links to you so that you don't have to do your own research. Somebody asked a question about how do you determine like who the staff person should be that is the liaison or sort of the go-between at a school. And this is a great question, and it really varies depending on the school and the person. A lot of places, schools that have this, it's often somebody who's sort of what we call a champion. So somebody who's informed, whether they've done their own research or they've attended a lot of trainings. They're not necessarily experts. They don't have to have all the answers, but they're willing to help find the answers if somebody approaches them. It's often, like a school counselor, school social worker, but not always. We have teachers who can serve as that sort of go-between, or who are like the kind of go-to person in a building. It could also be an administrator, the school principal or assistant principal. So there isn't necessarily a specific role that like, this is the person who it should be. It's really about finding the right person, regardless of what their role is. So hopefully that helps a little bit answer that question. Let me know if I didn't answer it all the way. So in order, and then, sorry, I'm getting prompted here. You're welcome, Donna. I'm getting prompted here to say something just about how you find your board policy. We've talked about policy. For those of you, I know we have some school board members on our call, which is our training, which is awesome. For those of you who want to know what your policies are, you can go to your school board's website. And then on that website, there's usually a link to the actual policies themselves. And then in those policies, you can sort of pull them up, and there's usually a search feature, and you can just search the words. You can either search the word transgender, or you can search the word sexual orientation. And that's often the fastest way to find any policies that you have that include protections when it comes to LGBTQ plus students. They often come up in our non-discrimination, anti-harassment, anti-bullying policies. So, all right. Any other questions?
Question about reproductive health programs and inclusive reproductive health programs.
Thanks for bringing that up, Lori. Would you like to take the lead on answering that?
Yeah. So I'll try to remember to put these things in the chat afterwards, or Kim, if you can reinforce things in the chat. So one thing is that even if you don't change your reproductive health program, or you're using Michigan model, say, or using an existing curriculum, there's ways that you can take that existing curriculum and be more inclusive in terms of using the word partner, or using gender neutral names, or names that are not all boy, girl, for example, in the scenarios, that type of thing. I know in terms of elementary school that one of the changes that we're observing with puberty curriculum is that it's not like in girls, you have a fallopian tube and you have a uterus. It's just like in people who have fallopian tubes and uterus, this is what you would notice. So it's like understanding that people's bodies, their physical selves are different and may not be the same as the gender with which they identify. Again, this is not typical, but we want to be inclusive of all students. So Puberty, the Wonder Years is a curriculum that is more inclusive. It's written by Wendy Sellers at the elementary level, and she's in Michigan, and it's a very good comprehensive curriculum. And at the middle and high school level, the Michigan model needs to be revised to be more inclusive. But one of the curricula that's out there that's no cost, and then also has Google Classroom accommodations, is the 3 Rs curriculum. It's also aligned with the National Sex Education Standards, and I'm seeing more districts take a look at the 3 Rs that's put out from Advocates for Youth. So take a look at those curricula. And then also Gender Spectrum has a guide around making your puberty education more inclusive, just in general. And actually Puberty, the Wonder Years is mentioned in the Gender Spectrum, one of the blogs about their guide. So a couple
Wow.
resources, and I'm glad to handle more questions offline.
All right. I put a few of those topics in the chat. Lori, if you want to do the links, I'm sorry I wasn't able to do all of it at once. Somebody asked about GSAs and pushback, and I just want to make sure that we address that so that folks know. So I just want to be really, really clear that the courts have upheld students' rights and schools' rights to have these gender and sexuality alliances for like decades. And they are protected under the Equal Access Act, which I can speak more about that if folks have more detailed questions. But I just want to be really clear that if your school has any non-curricular clubs that are allowed, student clubs that are allowed to meet, it cannot restrict any other non-curricular student clubs. So the school, it doesn't sound like that's what's happening, but I just want to be clear that you can't, once you offer at least one, you can't not allow LGBT students to meet as well. Also, you can't require them to jump through any additional hoops. So whatever your policies are when it comes to students joining groups, if you don't require parent permissions for your other groups, you can't all of a sudden say, well, we don't require them for anybody else, but we're going to require them for this particular group. And you can't do it after the fact. So you can't say, oh, well, we want parents to require permission for this group, so we're going to go back and make everybody else have to have parent permission also. Once you have an open forum, you have an open forum, and you can't sort of go backwards from that. And I just want to be really clear that courts over and over and over again have supported this. And I would say that if your school board needs some backup, that would be their backup, is to say it's the law. Like this isn't, this isn't a matter of anything except like the law says that we have to allow this. And so we will, and we're going to provide the space for our students to meet. If you are looking for additional support, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, has some resources. And Lori, I can't remember if they are included in our 2-page resource list for this training or not, that are actual, like, they're templates of letters that are on ACLU letterhead that answer all the legal questions around different topics, and forming GSAs is one of them. And we can provide a link to that page where you can see those templates, and you can just print one off and share it with whoever is, whoever needs to know or would be a good resource.
Kim, I shared that in the link in the chat already. So
it's like
that's a good one. That's a good one.
Connected. All right. Awesome. Yeah, this looks great. Everything's already in there. All right. So fantastic questions. Thank you. Keep them coming. And we are, I'm gonna move us forward again here. Oh, sorry. I was on the wrong screen. Not for you, for me. All right. All right, Tracy.
All right. Yep. So I'm going to try to move through this pretty quickly so we can get to the what do we do about all this stuff. But I think the data is important to look at just because it provides a rationale for why we need to do this. So we're going to look at some data specific to Michigan. So what we're talking about here, we know that from the 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, the YRBS, that 12% of Michigan students identified as LGB and 1.7% identified as transgender. And this data is true for all students in public schools across the state. Statistically, it can be extrapolated to all schools. So overall, 12.7% of students identify as LGB or T. So if you take an average classroom of 30 students, that would translate to approximately 4 students who identify as LGBT. And in a high school of 1,000 students, that would be about 120 students who are LGB and 17 who are transgender. So we know these students are in all our schools, whether they may or may not be visible. Staff may not know who these students are because LGBT students may feel unsafe being out, or they may be concerned about how their peer, family, or school community respond to them when they do come out. But we know that for a fact that these students are in every school in Michigan.
I
And they-
don't know why this slide is doing this weird paper cut thing.
Oh yeah, that is weird.
All of a sudden just randomly started doing it.
Took a bite out
Right.
of that. So, and what we want to, the importance of this slide is that LGBT students are diverse, representing all races, ethnicities, and socioeconomic status, and that it's proportional to the general population. So again, it cuts across the same aspects of diversity in our general population. We'll talk a little bit later about the intersectionality piece about how that impacts our students. So this looks at some of the risk factors for our LGBT students. Again, this is from YRBS data from 2017 and 19. It also includes data from the GLSEN Michigan State Snapshot from the 2019 National School Climate Survey. So we know what the important piece is to know here is that almost every student survey regarding aggression, harm, or violence, Michigan LGBT students reported higher rates than their heterosexual peers. So for example, according to the YRBS data, 43% of LGBT students were bullied at school or online in the 30 days previous to the survey. So again, kind of extrapolating that to a 9-month school year indicates that bullying is not a single incident, but forms a pattern of targeting the victim. So again, there's a connection here between verbal and physical threat and the impact on student behavior. So for example, if a student is being verbally or physically assaulted, school isn't a safe place, and they may not want to attend or then choose to skip school. And then as a result of missing school, their grades are impacted. So there's a clear connection between this kind of harassment and physical threats on school performance and attendance. In GLSEN's Michigan Snapshot, LGBT students reported not only bullying by their peers, but also by school staff. So this kind of behavior could put the school at legal liability if it's not addressed effectively or stopped by the administration. To me, that was pretty disturbing that 1 in 3 students heard, LGBT students heard school staff making negative comments about a person's gender expression. So understandably, the potential impact of this stigmatization, harassment, and discrimination is that nearly half of LGBT students say they don't feel connected to people at their own schools.
I'm just going to add too, if that's okay, Tracy.
Sure.
As we're thinking, big picture in this particular training and really thinking like long-term consequence, that when we don't enforce, we all have policies that protect students when it comes to bullying and harassment and discrimination. Every school in the state has one, you're required to by law. But when we don't enforce those policies, they not only impact the sort of daily experience that our students have, but they also impact their lifelong trajectory. If your students are having a negative experience in school, they're less likely to feel inclined to go on to higher education or like post K-12 school. Their grades are impacted. So if they do want to go to school, where they can go to school is limited. And again, these things impact not just in the moment, but if you don't go to college, you make less money, you're more likely to live in poverty in your whole lifetime. And so the need that we have, our responsibility to enforce these policies is really, really important for us to keep in mind. And not just when it comes to peer-to-peer issues, but also recognizing that when our staff are not using like names and pronouns that students go by, are making negative comments, that those are potential issues of harassment and need to be treated as such under the law, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because it is going to put you at legal liability if you don't address them. So I just want to connect that to sort of the long-term impact, the big picture impact.
Thanks, Kim. And these numbers are probably underrepresentation of the harassment that goes on. The students report not reporting them because either they feel that nothing will happen or the intervention will be ineffective. Mm-hmm. So as high as these numbers are, they probably even don't represent the total picture. And this speaks specifically to our transgender and gender expansive students. This data comes from the GLSEN National School Climate Survey. And again, the data shows here that the majority of transgender and gender nonconforming students experience bullying and harassment for their gender identity and expression. And again, clear enumeration of gender identity and expression as protected classes in school anti-bullying policies has been shown to reduce this type of harassment when staff training occurs. So being very explicit that transgender and gender expansive students are included in those policies is vitally important. One really important piece also is the use of names and pronouns. Names and pronouns are personal and important. When a student's name and pronouns are not used appropriately, it can impact their ability to learn. So using name and pronouns a student identifies is an educational mental health best practice. And there's a piece of research that shows when current name or pronoun is not being used in front of their peers or school community, it has a negative impact on mental health outcomes. So research on transgender children and youth whose pronouns and names are respected and who are supported in their transition exhibit much better mental health than those who are not affirmed in these ways. So a key strategy in suicide prevention is to use name and pronouns that students know themselves to be. And we've got a research article summary that relates to that. So just that simple act of using names and pronouns can have a huge impact, positive impact on our transgender, gender expansive students.
All right. So when at the beginning, when we were doing the Mentimeter activity, one of the things that came up, one of the systems that we talked about was discipline. And so we want to just take a moment to look at school discipline and sort of talk a little bit too about intersectionality and the idea of sort of the ways that our students of color, our BIPOC students who are also LGBTQ, that they're experiencing not only homophobia or transphobia, but also racism. And those things have a compounding effect on their experiences in school. And just wanting to remember that and look at the ways that institutional bias, that the bias of educators can come into play, especially when it comes to discipline, just as one example of a system where this really plays out clearly. And I'm guessing all of you have heard of the school to prison pipeline. We talk about this pretty extensively, especially when it comes to Black and Brown students. We also see a similar school to prison pipeline when it comes to LGBTQ students. So nearly half of LGBTQ students who had missed school because they felt unsafe had also been disciplined at school. And we often hear stories of where an LGBT student is harassed, they bring the harassment to the administration, and then they are the ones who are actually disciplined, as being told that, like, if they acted differently or if they didn't dress that way, then these things wouldn't happen. Or maybe they retaliate against the initial harassment, and then they are the ones who are held responsible, as opposed to the student who started, who was doing the harassing. So just wanted to keep that in mind. 1 in 3 LGBTQ students reported being sent to the principal's office, receiving detention, in or out of school suspension, or expulsion from school. This is much higher than is proportional for our LGBT student broadly. They make up about 13% of our student population, but about 1/3 of them have been have gone through some kind of pretty intensive discipline. And then as students who experience higher rates of victimization are also experiencing higher rates of discipline. So again, you can sort of see that connection, and really wanting to be thoughtful about what are the ways that my own bias as an educator may be playing out, and how I'm enforcing the policies that already exist. So, and I just want to be clear too, that in addition to seeing this school to prison pipeline and these numbers being higher for LGBTQ students, for Black and Brown LGBTQ students, they're even higher. So, so again, sort of that compounding impact. I want to just, yeah, go ahead.
Maybe not yet, sorry, but there was a question around testing season and how you can help prepare students. And I said you would answer that live, but I realized I'm interrupting a chain here.
Yeah. Okay. I will definitely respond to that. Yeah, when I get through this piece, just because it's connected. Thank you. So I do want to talk just for a moment when it comes to discipline about the experiences of LGBTQ students when it comes to policing. And I do this because most of us, or many of us, have school resource officers or who have some kind of police presence in our schools, and really wanting to think about, is that is this helpful? Is it causing harm? And what are the experiences of LGBTQ students outside of a school setting that they are bringing into the school setting space, so that you have a sense of the context that our LGBTQ plus students, especially our LGBTQ plus students of color, are coming into that space, and what having a police officer or a school resource officer in a school setting might have on their experiences in school and their feelings of safety. So 1 in 5 LGBTQ youth reported being harassed or mistreated by police. That's compared to 1 in 7 straight and cisgender youth. So you can see those numbers are disproportionate. And our transgender and non-binary youth and our Black youth, both who are LGBTQ and not LGBTQ, have the highest rates of harassment and mistreatment by police. My guess is that these numbers will not be, or the concept behind these numbers will maybe not be surprising to folks, but the rates might be surprising. The numbers themselves might be surprising. When it comes to those interactions with police, the harassment and mistreatment, the overwhelming majority of LGBTQ youth have low levels of trust in the police. The police are not going to be who folks turn to, and in fact may be seen as people who are not trustworthy. We have also heard many stories from our LGBTQ students that the school resource officer or the police officer was actually an instigator of bullying and harassment, or was present when bullying and harassment happened but didn't intervene. So really wanting to think about, if we are going to have school resource officers or police presence in our schools, that we want to make sure that they are trained and understand what their job is when it comes to enforcing policy, and that it would be absolutely unacceptable for them, and hopefully cause for termination if they were harassing and bullying students based on anything, but certainly based on their LGBTQ plus identity. Again, transgender and non-binary youth had the highest rates, and Black LGBTQ had the highest rates of having no trust whatsoever, and only white, straight, cisgender youth were in the majority, had the majority of people reporting that they trusted the police. So there's a very, very specific group of students who find the police to be trustworthy and safe, and the rest of students, most of them don't find having a police presence to be trustworthy and safe. So wow, this is so weird how these slides are showing up this way. They don't look like this in my PowerPoint. So when it comes to intersectionality, again, we just want to sort of bring into people's awareness that that when it comes to our LGBTQ youth and our Black and brown youth, there's a lot of sort of intersecting issues that can come up and intersecting experiences when it comes to the ways that our sort of big picture systems and policies are being implemented. And you can see sort of where those circles overlap. The outcomes that we see are higher rates of school failure, higher rates of discipline, being involved in the juvenile justice system, more experiences of trauma, mental health issues, physical health issues, and abuse. So really wanting to have an awareness about the impact that having these multiple marginalized identities can have on our students, so that we as adults in that space can be prepared to address all of our students, the whole student that comes into our presence, and making sure that our policies and practices address these issues, and that we are being trained, again, these systems that we are being trained as educators and school personnel around issues of bias, so that we are aware of our own biases more, and can make sure that we're doing what we can to look at the ways our biases may be playing out in terms of our data. Whew, that is a lot of information. So I'm gonna stop sharing I'm going to look at all the comments and questions while you are in your small groups talking, and I will make sure that we address them. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give you all a chance to connect in small groups, just to talk through kind of what your experiences are, what are your reactions to the data, and really thinking about what are the ways that we can impact the systems in our schools to mitigate these outcomes that we're seeing when it comes to our LGBTQ plus students, especially our LGBTQ plus students of color. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. So I just want to check in with folks and see how your conversations went. Is there anything from your good? I appreciate the thumbs up. Thank you. Anything folks want to lift up from your conversations that feel like it would be, you know, that were helpful for you, might be good to share with the group more broadly. And you can just take yourself off mute. Jessica, I see you, Jessica McCallum.
We were just talking about how our student information system, you can actually, there's like a background screen that you can change. And we have Synergy, and it's really nice to be inclusive and honor kids. So I just didn't, maybe everybody already knew that, but that was when we switched to Synergy, that was a nice feature that we were just talking about in our group, how that, you know, not everybody knows that that's available.
Mm-hmm. That is such a fantastic resource, your student information system, and how you can navigate your student information system. We actually just did a training a couple of weeks ago on student information systems that we recorded that provides all the information that folks need to know about how to navigate their student information systems, what you can and can't do, what the law says. And we are happy to share that with folks if you are interested or feel like it would be helpful for the people who manage your student information system to know about it. So just let us know, and we will definitely pass that information along.
So quick follow-up question. Jessica and I were talking about that question. What do you do with the student who is telling us here at the school, well, I haven't told my mom and dad yet, but I want you to use this name and these pronouns. If we change it in our Power School system, it's going to show up when the parents check anything on Power School or when we send a report card or what have you. How is that handled? I mean, we on our side want to honor the student and make sure we're using the proper terms and names, but yet, I mean, how do we handle that? Would we not change it in Power School and then just try to remember, or?
Yeah, such a great question, and one that definitely was brought up in our in the webinar we did focused on student information systems. We get this question all the time. So there are ways within Power School to make sure that the teacher's roster shows the name, the name the student goes by, their current name, as opposed to their legal name. And so that's one thing that you want to take advantage of, to make sure that the teacher has the name, so that if they have a sub or something like that, the name the student goes by is what pops up. When it comes to how to change it within your system, you can, you know, most systems, I think all systems at this point have two name options, a legal name and a, you know, nickname or preferred name or some other name category. And you can decide how you want your reports to come up or how you want that information shared. So depending on how you do that, you can there are ways that you can make sure that the system captures what you need to have for reporting. So it's got the legal name, but where it comes up is the name the student goes by. If the student wants you to change it in the system, having a conversation with them to say, okay, we need to talk through how you want us to change it in the system, so that if your parents don't know, it doesn't accidentally show up in a report card or a letter home or in the parent portal. So let's talk that through. And so letting the student kind of guide the decision-making about how that information is reported in the student information system, to make sure that that they are, you know, that they're safe, and that they're not going to be unintentionally outed to their family. So I'm happy to kind of dig into stuff a little bit more sort of offline, and to share the webinar that really goes into a lot of detail about how to do all those things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So thank you for lifting those questions up, so important. And we're going to move into our next activity because we need a good chunk of time. And I see that there's a question coming up around bathrooms. I'm going to dig into the strategies that we're going to go into, and then I will answer questions, but I want to make sure that you have enough time to do this activity. So we are, Katie or Lori, somebody, can you post the link to the Google Doc here in the chat, please? That would be great. And all right, so we are going to we're going to do this rotation station activity. So if we were in person, basically what this would look like is, we'd have a bunch of flip chart on the wall, you'd be in small groups, and you'd go from station to station and write your ideas down. So this is the online version of that activity. And so what you're going to do is you're going to be broken into groups again. The groups are going to be a little bit bigger because we have 10 stations. And in your group, whatever your group number is, that is the station that you start with. And your job as a group is to just sort of look at the prompt and then provide strategies that you've used or you've heard of that have that you want to sort of add to the list. And then we'll rotate. We'll probably have time to rotate 2 or 3 times. And what we'll come up with is a document that includes a lot of resources and a lot of strategies in a bunch of different topic areas. We're going to share this with you afterwards. So you'll have you'll have all of these resources at the end. So everybody's coming back now. Welcome. So we just want to take a couple minutes here to see if folks had any questions about strategies they saw, or just general questions at this point, or comments about strategies that you saw. Be welcome to also. And I know we do have a couple questions from the chat that we'll make sure we answer before we end.
Kim, I had a quick thing from our group. So the issue has come up, like when you have a staff person that is, like philosophically against using the name or pronoun or whatever that a student wants. Can you speak to the OCR, the piece around that it's like not even just the best practice and right thing to do, but also the legal issues?
Yeah, sure. So, so the Office for Civil Rights they're the group, the federal group that is in charge of interpreting and enforcing Title IX, and they have folks who do like investigations when they have complaints that come to them. And in the instructions that were provided to the people who are doing investigations on complaints, a specific example of like a evidence of Title IX being violated, the one specific example they gave was when a staff member doesn't use the name and pronouns that a student asks for. So OCR has specifically said that this is an example of a violation of Title IX, that when a staff member refuses to use, it's not like a situation where a staff member makes a mistake and is like, trying to use the right name and pronouns, but screws up once or twice, messes up, and like, but they're working on it and they're trying to. These are situations where staff are explicitly saying like, no, I'm not going to use that. So folks need to know that, because if that's happening in your school setting, you are definitely putting yourself at risk for an OCR complaint, and for, putting yourself at legal liability. And I will say too, that we've worked with Troon Law Firm, who represents most districts in the state. And they are absolutely like on board and saying that, districts have a responsibility to use the name and pronouns that students go by, and not doing so puts them at legal liability. So this isn't just coming from OCR. It's not just coming from us. It's also coming from school lawyers. Great question. Thank you. So we have a couple minutes. I want to make sure I answer a couple questions. that have come up. One was about testing and the name and gender marker that students have to put on their, their testing documents, whether it's the SAT, ACT, PSAT, or it's the Michigan testing. So what comes up is usually, like on the forms, is usually, the legal name that the student goes by and the gender marker. They're required to put their gender marker. If you are able, I know that there are some tests, my understanding is that there are some tests that are printed out that have the student's name on them. We do know of schools where they'll put a different, like a label on that so that the student doesn't have to see their dead name as soon as they're like opening the test. And seeing a name that a student doesn't go by, is their legal name, is another name for a dead name, can create a lot of anxiety and, distress for students in an already like high stakes, anxious situation, the testing. So really wanting to keep that in mind. Other things that folks have done, somebody mentioned this in the chat, Claire talked about like that she prepares, or that they prepare their students ahead of time so that they know that they are going to see their dead name on the testing document, and to help prepare them ahead of time for that, so that you can work with them around their anxiety, around sort of what that brings up for them. Those are both really good techniques that you can use to help prepare students if you can't actually change the testing document itself, to work with the student so that it's not a surprise, and it doesn't throw them off, and that they sort of have some coping mechanisms in place that they're working with you around, to navigate the feelings that come up when they see their dead name. The other question that came up was about bathrooms and locker rooms. And I know Lori commented, provided a resource just briefly, but I do want to sort of broaden the response a little bit to say that that students need to be able to use the bathrooms and locker rooms that align with their gender identity. That means that it doesn't necessarily. So some students will want to use a bathroom that is like a gender neutral bathroom, or a single stall restroom, and that's great. It's a really great option to offer, but you cannot tell transgender students, you can't tell anybody that that's the bathroom that they must use. So you can provide that, and you should provide that as an option. But if a student comes to you and says, I want to use the bathroom that aligns with my gender identity, then they have the right to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity. If you have pushback from other students who say, I don't want to use that bathroom, or I don't want to use a bathroom, or share a bathroom with a transgender student, then you can provide accommodations to that student, but you can't tell then this transgender student that they can't use the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity. So anyone who wants to use needs accommodations around bathrooms, you work with that individual student to make sure that their needs are met. So I'm going to keep answering. Sorry, Lori's like, don't forget sketches. So I'm going to share my screen and do the ending. There are other questions that haven't been answered. I'm going to stay late and answer those questions. So if you haven't had a question answered, I want to make sure that you get the information that you need, but I also want to make sure folks who have to leave can have what they need to. All right. So first, I just want to encourage folks to think about a commitment that you want to make as a result of participating in this workshop, and to write that down. I will come back to this stuff. If you are looking for sketches, the code that you need is LGBTQ+ inclusive schools. That's the session code. We'll put that in the chat so you have that as well. So just a reminder that you need to include your PIC code, the session code. You need to email the completed form to Kyle Kirkby, whose contact information is there, and all of this will be included in that follow-up email as well. If you are looking for social work CEs, we already have all the information we need, so you are all set. And then we will be following up. Again, we've mentioned that we'll give you the PowerPoint, that resource list, an evaluation hyperlink, which has also been dropped in the chat, and any sort of additional resources that we've talked about. We'll kind of look through and see if there's anything that we want to include in that follow-up email as well. I also want to make sure folks know that we do have this drop-in TA that we provide. It's the first Thursday of every month. Our last one of this school year will be in June, the first Thursday in June. And we'll do that from 8 to 9 in the morning, and then again from 3 to 4 p.m. It's just an opportunity to pop in and ask questions, to learn from each other. You can drop in and out. You don't have to stay for the whole time. And if you are looking for resources or support outside of that, please don't hesitate to be in touch. We're available anytime, but that's a specific time. If you want to just pop in, you can do that. We have all of these trainings and we're down to one more training in the school year. Can't sort of believe that we're at that point. The last training we're going to be offering, this is not next Tuesday, but it's 2 weeks from today, and it's focused on classroom strategies. So this was our sort of school system-wide approach. The next one, the last one that we're doing, is focused specifically on classroom strategies, things teachers can do in their classrooms to make sure that they're inclusive and supportive. And I also just want to make sure that folks have, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, my apologies. Our contact information, the first one is mine, the second one is Tracy's. If you have any questions, you want follow-up support, you want to talk something through, just know that we are available and happy to be a resource in any way that we can. Thank you so much. For folks who need to leave, you're welcome to head out. For folks who want to stay and hear the answer to I think we had one other question that I wanted to make sure to address, which is I just want to make sure that folks know that when it comes to professional development trainings like this, that we provide those opportunities not just to our the people who are in our school buildings or in our classrooms, but also to folks who work with the school but are outside of it. So people like coaches, people like bus drivers, our paraprofessionals who are in schools, who are often the front lines when it comes to working with students. We want to make sure that those professional development opportunities are provided to them as well, and that they're compensated for their time. If we're going to ask them to participate in PD, we should be paying them to do it the same that we do for any other school staff. And I say that specifically in part because we hear of situations where like we just had a situation where a bus driver unintentionally outed a student to a parent, just having a conversation with them when they dropped their kid off and they didn't know that the name that the student went by on the bus was different than the parent knew them by, and that created a difficult situation for the student. It didn't come from a bad place. It was a really good intention, but if we don't provide that training to all of our all the folks who come into contact with our students and families, then we're putting ourselves at risk for causing harm without meaning to. So we just want to thank everyone for being a part of the webinar today. On behalf of our training team and the MDE LGBTQ+ Students Project, we really appreciate your participation and all the work that you're doing to support LGBTQ+ students and their families. Thanks very much. Have a great day, everyone.